Hi, I'm Philip with G6 Technology Services. In this video, I'd like to talk about some of the Sophos offerings in the SG series, and these are devices that will run UTM-9. The other line that they have, which I believe is the same physically as the XG series, and that runs their next generation firewall. But I still prefer UTM-9 and they still fully support it, so we'll just go over the devices that will run UTM-9, or that come that way from the factory. So in this line, they've got, starting at the lower end, here's everything compared. So this is the smallest desktop offering. That'll be the 105 or 115, I believe. So we'll scroll down here, and they give us, we'll come back to this, some of the expansion modules. This is, at a glance, this is some of the statistics, some of the performance for the different models. So we'll see here that their lowest end model, the SG105, is a desktop form factor. It comes with 4 gigabit Ethernet ports on the back of it. So that will give you basically 1 for your WAN and 3 internal networks. Or if you decide to use VLANs, you can split them up any which way you please. The wireless model supports all the way up to AC. It does have external power supplies, so it doesn't have an internal power supply. It comes with a little brick that plugs into the wall, and then you have a DC connector that plugs into the back of it. It's got a firewall throughput of 2500 megabits or 2.5 gigabits per second, VPN throughput of 325 meg, IPS, which is the intrusion prevention system, 350 meg throughput if you have that enabled. And then we don't use this, but it's the antivirus proxy, gives you 380 megs of throughput if you're scanning web traffic. So we'll go down and look at these models in more detail. So for most small businesses or even residential applications, the SG105 is perfectly capable. That's actually the exact same unit that I run at my house, and it is able to keep up no problem. And you can see here we have the throughput, 2.5 gigabits on the firewall, and we don't do a lot of high throughput transfers or anything. It's mostly just streaming video and checking email and whatnot, so pretty low utilization. And which unit will work best for you obviously depends on what kind of workload it's going to have and what kind of network traffic you expect to run through it. So in this case, the SG105 is a great option. We can see down here it comes with redundant power supply options. So it comes from the factory with 1 power supply, and you can order a second one at an additional cost to plug that in. And so that way, if one of them stops working, the other one will pick up and you don't lose power to the device. And additionally, I don't think it's mentioned here, but all of these units support high availability. So if you buy a second identical unit, you can connect them together, and if one unit dies altogether, then the second one will pick up. And we've tested the high availability failover, and it only ends up dropping like 1 or 2 packets if you do a ping while it's transitioning. It's great. You don't even notice that it's happening in most cases. It's so quick. It really is great. So we also have HDMI, which you really don't need at all. I don't think you even need that during the initial setup because it comes with the software already on it. It's really just if you need to reflash it, or if it has some kind of issue and you have to do maintenance on it. And that would be the same for the USB port, so you can plug in a flash drive or a keyboard or something. It does come with 2 of those, so you can obviously use a hub if you need to do that. And you get 2 options for serial if you like to do it that way. You have your RJ45 connector, which they do include the serial to RJ45 cable in the package. And actually, I don't think that's the case anymore. They used to do that. Now, this one, the micro USB, it has an integrated serial to USB adapter inside of it. So you just connect the micro USB to your computer and it will emulate a serial connection. And then we have our network ports, which are all fully assignable, reassignable. So they come with, let's see if we can zoom this in at all. It's too blurry, you can't really see it, but they come with labels on them. So that one says LAN, this one says WAN, this one says DMZ, and this one says HA. So what they intend for you to use them for is your internal LAN, your WAN, your internet connection, if you have any DMZ devices, and then your HA port, which is high availability, which is what you would use to connect the unit to another unit if you wanted to enable high availability. Again, these are all fully reassignable, so you don't have to use them for the purpose that they're labeled with. You can choose any of these ports for any purpose within the interface, and you can bridge them together if you want. If you have a switch that's capable, and you can have a high throughput connection to your switch and then just use VLANs for your different networks. It's up to you. So, and another thing, all of these models, it says here, all these models have SSDs. They don't ship them with hard drives anymore. If you get a recent model, then they'll all have an SSD, which is wonderful. So, moving down, the next model that we have, and that's the SG125 and 135. And again, this is a desktop model, meaning that it's intended to sit on a tabletop. It comes with little rubber feet, and I believe you can get a rack mount kit for it if you want to. Otherwise, you can just do it the old-fashioned way and just get a one-use shelf to put in your rack. But it's intended to be a desktop model, and both of these models, or all four of these models, 105, 115, 125, and 135 that we've looked at so far, do have a W variant. So the 125 is hardwire only, and the 125W includes these wireless antennas and wireless radios inside. So again, we don't recommend using that. It might work if you just have a small setup and this is the only thing you're going to have for wireless, but if you need more coverage, they do sell access points that you can plug in that will contact this unit and it acts as a controller, but there's a lot of extra licensing fees involved, and it's usually a better experience to go with another vendor for Wi-Fi. Like, for example, we use Ubiquiti UniFi products, so we'll just connect, or we get the wired only model and then connect our Ubiquiti UniFi access points for wireless connectivity. That's a really good combination. They work well together. So as we can see here, our throughputs just go up. It looks like the 135 is about double the 125's performance in all areas. So, you know, that's, again, it depends on what kind of load it's going to be under. You get pretty much the same types of connectivity. You have the redundant power, HDMI, USB, console, your SFP, but on this model, both the 125 and 135, you get 8 gigabit Ethernet ports. And there's really not much else to say. It's the same as the last model, has better performance, more ports, and it's still SSD, no hard drives in any of these models. So we'll go back down to the 210 and 230, which we'll start spending less and less time on these because there's a lot that's in common. So a big change here with the 210 and 230 is that these are all 1U rack mountable, and they come with the rack mount ears. They're not meant to be used as a desktop unit. And you can see now if we compare our throughput, it's significantly higher than our last system. So these are meant for larger businesses with a lot of users. And we get, again, we have our standard slew of connectors and our one expansion module. So the only difference here is that we don't have external power supplies. They're integrated. So we just have our standard power connector that plugs in here, and then we have this strange looking connector that we can use to attach a redundant power supply if we would like to do that. So let's move on again. And then we have the 310 and 330. which again, we just have more performance. They've changed some of the ports. We actually get two 10 gigabit SFP plus ports built in this time. Yeah, that is not included on the previous model, so that is a nice addition. And we do still have the one expansion bay, which will work with any of those units in the 1U column of expansion modules at the top. And moving on again, we have our SG430 and SG450. We have our higher performance, and now we have two expansion modules. And since we do have those, it looks like they've taken out the integrated 10 gigabit SFP. So I guess they would just expect if you need that, you'll just add your own. And we have the same power supply arrangement on the 430, but on the 450, we actually have removable power supplies. So this whole module will slide out, and you can order an additional one to put next to it for your redundant power supplies. So I really like this type of arrangement, because if one of your power supplies dies, you can just pop it out and replace it. You don't have to send the unit in for maintenance, which you would have to do for this one, which has the integrated power supply. So we'll move back down our list, and now we have our SG550 and SG650, which are the largest units for your data centers or large enterprise buildings where you have just a huge number of users. You can see here that we have 65 gigabits of throughput on our firewall, and we move now to 2U high units instead of the 1U, and we also get external access, it looks like, to our SSDs. So if you needed to swap them out, if you have high availability set up and one of them, the hard drive or the SSD, goes out on it, looks like you can just change that so you don't have to open the unit up and take it out of the rack. So that lets you get up and running faster. And on the back of our unit, we again have our redundant removable power supplies. So you can see they have quite a large offering of hardware, and there's something here that will work for any circumstance, any situation. Whether you're a residential customer, small business owner, all the way up to running a data center or a large enterprise business. And what also you can do, you'll see here these throughput ratings. The units can be put in high availability, which I had mentioned earlier, and I was just referring to it in the active-passive failover mode, but they do have a mode where you can pool the units together to share a load. So at the bottom of this document, we get to the licensing. So that's the kicker here with some of this stuff. They have great hardware, but the hardware doesn't do anything without the license. So they are pretty affordable, and they do scale with the type of hardware that you're getting. So a license for, say for example, the network protection license for the SG105 is going to be significantly cheaper than a license for one of these SG650s, for example. And the hardware cost, of course, scales the same way. So the licensing on the smaller units is very affordable. If you want to just have basically your routing, DNS, DHCP, etc., VPN remote access, then all you need to have is the network protection subscription. And just to give you a quick example, so let's say the bottom of the line offering, which I don't mean anything negative by that, that's a great unit. Like I said, it's the same one I use at home, but the cheapest offering you can get, the SG105, if we just look here on Firewalls.com, which I'm just looking at for reference, but Sophos does have a lot of reseller partners, and if you have one in your area, they will be more likely and more willing usually to work with you and be more flexible. So you should at least contact them to see what their pricing is, and you can always fall back on something like Firewalls.com. And this is just something I found on Google. I've never used them before, so I'm not vouching for them. I'm just using it as a pricing example because I've found that the pricing on here is very close to what I pay our local reseller for Sophos products and services. So the unit itself is $440 approximately, depending on what vendor you get it from, but it will be close to that. And that comes with just the unit, and you get a power supply and your console cable. So on top of that, you're going to need to get some type of license package, and I've already pulled that up. Down here we have our network protection, and they have different options for length, and you do save money if you get the longer subscription. So what you can do is, if you can afford all at once to just pay $102, it will last you 3 years, and it's pretty affordable. You do have to pay it all at once, but if you wanted to think about it on a year-by-year basis, it does break down to $34 a year. So that really isn't that much. You think about an initial purchase of $550 to $600 after shipping and taxes, and you're good for 3 years. And after that, you'll need to renew the license, and those, they give you a little bit of a break, but not really. So the 3-year network protection is $97, which is about $32.33 per year if you wanted to break it down that way, but again, you do have to pay for it all up front. So if you're having cash flow issues, or you just want to take it 1 year at a time because you're not sure if you're going to like the product, they do have the smaller packages, or the less duration of 1 year for $41 for the renewal and $43 for the new subscription. So I think this is a really nice product for small businesses and for residential customers. If you do like the UTM-9 platform, like I said, also this is the platform, the SG series, that does run UTM-9, which is technically, I guess, the older version, but it's still actively maintained and supported. And I've asked Sophos, and they don't have any plans to discontinue it anytime soon, as far as the person I was talking to is aware. So it is a perfectly reliable, valid product that's not like it's hinging on its end of life or anything like that. And they've even said that the XG, the next generation software, is still kind of the baby of the family. They're still working on it, still has some bugs, and they actually recommend for larger customers, if they do have some reliability concerns, just to go with UTM-9. And it does work on either hardware. So if you buy the XG and decide you don't like the next generation, you can wipe it and put UTM-9 on there. And same thing with the SG platform. If you don't like UTM-9, you can wipe it and put the XG next generation software on there. However, if you do either of those, I'm not sure how the licensing works. Your local reseller might be able to convert the license from one to another, or you may have to purchase new licenses. But the hardware platform that you choose here, whether it's Sophos SG or XG, that only specifies what version comes from the factory preloaded on there, but you can put whatever version of it you want on there. So that covers the official Sophos hardware options. And another thing that they have is the ability to install their XG or UTM-9 product on your own hardware, or to virtualize it. And that works pretty well. I've tried it before. We haven't had any type of reliability issues or anything like that. The only downside to it is that the licensing is significantly more expensive, since they're not making anything off of hardware sales. They don't give you the same low rates on the licensing and renewal. So it does cost more, and I don't think I mentioned before, but all of those hardware products come with an unlimited user count or device count. So you can have an unlimited number on any of those products of users and devices on them. And if you do decide to put it on your own hardware, then you pay based on the number of users or the number of devices. That's what they call it, but it's basically, I think, the number of IP addresses that it detects on the network. So their lowest offering, I think, is 10 IP addresses, 10 devices, and it just goes up from there incrementally, and you still have the different types of packages that you can choose. If you want to just go with the network protection, or if you wanted to go with their full guard that includes all the different package options. And we can go over some of those in a minute, but that does work, but it is more expensive. So another option, if you don't want to pay for their hardware and you still want to use the software, but you don't want to pay for the virtualization or self-hosted licensing, there's two options. You can choose Sophos UTM Essential Firewall, which is completely free and is licensed for commercial use, and it really is very limited as to what it can do. You can see here under features that it basically is just like a consumer router that you can buy at the store. It just has DNS, DHCP, firewall, and it does router option, or it does internet routing, NAT, things like that. So it is the exact same product, so I guess that wasn't completely correct when I said it's just like a consumer thing you can get off the shelf. That in terms of features, that's what I meant, but it is still the enterprise class software, the same exact software that runs on all the other units. It's just limited by the license to what features are enabled, basically. So again, it is still very usable, and I would definitely recommend, if you have some hardware that can run it, that even this essential firewall is better in terms of security than one of those off-the-shelf consumer routers that you can get at the store. So it will do the job. The other option is that if you are a home user and you're going to be using it in a residential setting, they do offer the Home Edition, which also is free, but it has every single feature unlocked and ready to use. But it is a violation of their terms to use it for commercial purposes. And it's also limited to the number of users. I think it's 100 users. Let me see if I can pull that up. Oh, it's 50. So you can have up to 50 IP addresses, but it does come with all the features unlocked. It comes with remote access VPN, so that's really cool. That's something where if you are away from your home and you have a home server or something you need to access, you can do that. Or what you can do is, you've probably seen online, if you watch anything on YouTube, everyone's advertising these VPN services for privacy. So if you're on a public hotspot or something, even if you don't have any home servers or anything, you can use this remote access VPN to route all of your internet traffic through your home internet connection. So people who operate the hotspot, or if it's an unsecured network and someone's snooping on wireless traffic, they won't be able to see what you're doing. So that by itself is a great feature, because you don't have to pay for a VPN service. You can just run it yourself. And then you don't have to worry about a third-party VPN provider looking at your traffic or selling your history to someone else, because, I mean, we really don't know what they're doing with it. They say they're not doing that, but we don't have any way to prove it. So personally, I feel a lot better having my ISP have that information rather than some company somewhere. So this way, you can have the protection from snooping at a hotspot and the security of knowing that your traffic is not being intercepted by a third party by just hosting your own VPN server at your house. So anyway, let's go back to some of the licensing options. So if we look in our UTM, oh, that was the wrong button. That's actually here. So what I was talking about before, the different licenses, this is the essential license, and you can see here everything is disabled except we get a few endpoint antivirus licenses. So with the network protection license, you get basically all the features that you probably want. So IPS, including the pattern updates for that, DOS and flood protection, SSL and IPsec based remote access VPN, advanced routing, WAN uplink balancing, and that's really cool if you have flaky internet connection, you have multiple ISPs, then you can connect both of them and have it share between the two of them, or use one as a primary and then fail over to the other one if the first one stops working. So this package includes pretty much everything that I would need personally. I don't have any use at home or at work for any of these other features at the moment, but we'll go ahead and just do a quick summary of what they do if you wanted to pay for any of these additional subscriptions. So the email protection, I think, is really only useful if you run your own email servers on site. I don't think it would have much of a use if you use something like G Suite, formerly known as Google Apps, because they just have such good filtering built in. They have good spam protection. They have their built-in antivirus that scans attachments. So I don't really think there's a need for that, but it depends on your use case. If you have your own Exchange server or some other mail server on site, then it may be a nice offering, and you can contact your Sophos reseller and they'll explain it to you and help you figure out if that's going to be something that would benefit you. And web protection is basically content filtering and reporting combined with antivirus. So it acts as a proxy, essentially. It's transparent, so you don't have to configure the clients, and traffic, once you turn this on, will go through the filters before it's allowed out to the internet. It will scan traffic for viruses, it'll scan it for reputation and block based on that, or it can block based on category. It does allow for HTTPS filtering, so you would have to get the root certificate off the firewall and install it on all your endpoints, otherwise you'll get HTTPS issues. And if you don't enable HTTPS filtering, then it's basically useless because everything uses HTTPS these days, so it wouldn't be filtering much. And another cool thing is application control, which I believe you do have to have HTTPS filtering enabled and working for that to be effective, but it lets you block, instead of based on a category, it can detect certain applications. Like you can say, I want to block Facebook, and it automatically includes all the subdomains and domains that Facebook uses, so you don't have to manually make sure that all of them end up in a blocked category. And it also does the same thing for allowing. So if you wanted to say, I want Google Drive to be allowed but block all other file sharing sites, then it lets you do that. Another nice feature that is included is web caching. So if you don't have a very good internet connection, then you can enable caching. So anytime somebody loads a website or downloads a file, it will save a copy for some predetermined amount of time on the firewall. So subsequent downloads will not go to the origin, they will go to the firewall and they will download instantly from there without using any more internet bandwidth. So something like that might be convenient if you have a metered connection, like an LTE connection, or if you just have a really slow DSL connection or something like that. It might be useful. But if you do have a fast enough connection, I've found that it just causes more problems than it's worth, especially in some cases like speed tests are not accurate. It shows, even if you have a 10 meg connection, it'll show over a gigabit because it's speed testing from the firewall and not from the speed test server. So there's a lot you have to do to tune it and exclude sites from the cache and whatnot. So if you have a decent internet connection, I would just not worry about turning on the caching, but it may be of use to you. Web server protection, that one actually is really useful. I don't use it personally because we just have our web servers hosted in the cloud presently, but it's great if you have on-site web servers because it essentially acts as a reverse proxy, and any connection that normally you would just forward a port or use NAT rules to send it straight to a web server, you would not do that, and use web server protection instead, so you still point your external records to the IP address of the firewall, but then within the web server protection control area, you just define what host name goes to which real server, and it will forward it for you and filter and protect the traffic in the meantime. And it also terminates HTTPS. So you can put, for example, a wildcard certificate on the firewall, and then you don't have to even have HTTPS on your internal servers. They can just all be HTTP, and that connection to the firewall will not be secured, but then the connection outside of that will be secured. Or you can go full HTTPS through the entire chain, and that will work also. So what it does is it has, besides doing that, it has, it says right here, it has a number of different features. Cross-site scripting protection, SQL injection protection, application attack protection, cookie tampering protection, and more. So basically what some of these mean, like cookie tampering protection, it will sign all of the cookies that your web server issues. So that way, if a cookie is sent back from a client that's been tampered with, it will be rejected by the firewall and won't even make it to the web server, so people can't trick your application into doing something by messing with a cookie. And the same thing is true, it doesn't list it here, but it does form hardening, which it has a similar thing. It will sign your form. So if anyone tries to add or remove fields or change the names of fields or anything like that, it will not allow that form to be submitted. It will show some kind of error message, and that form data will not even make it to your web server. So that is really great if you don't have that kind of protection implemented in your application or on the server. Then this just covers it. And also it's great extra layer of protection in case you don't have the most up-to-date software on the server. If there's some vulnerability and it hasn't been updated or patched, this system updates with different signatures, and it will block known types of attacks against the types of servers that you're running internally. So those attacks will never even make it to the server, even if it's vulnerable to them. So if you do run servers internally, web servers that are accessible from the outside, then this is something that you might want to look into. It's a great utility. It does, like I said, all of these modules cost extra. You have to subscribe to it, but I think it's great. They do, of course, have other options out there that you can do without having to do it through the firewall, and usually they're free, but what you're paying for here is a couple of things. One is the convenience. It's a turnkey solution. You just literally, there's a little on-off toggle. You just turn it on and it's set up. You have to add your host names and your web servers to the list, but you can have it fully up and running in a few minutes. And with something else, like a Linux server that has, I forget the name of it, but there's some web server reverse proxy module that you can add to Apache that essentially, I think it's the same thing that this uses, but you have to configure all that manually. You have to make sure to update it whenever it needs to be updated, and it's just a lot of extra work. So if that's something you don't mind and you just don't want to pay for it and you'd like to do it yourself, that's a perfectly reasonable solution, and you can do that. But here you get that turnkey solution. It's automatically updated, and it's just, it just works. Not to steal a certain other fruit company's logo, but it just works. So wireless protection, again, as I'd mentioned earlier, I don't really recommend that. It might be a good solution for you if you have a very small physical footprint that this router will be in, where one access point will cover the whole area. That might be just really convenient for you. Otherwise, if you need multiple access points, I probably wouldn't use this. I'd go with something like a Cisco, Meraki, or Ubiquiti Unify system. They work really well, and I'm sure this wireless protection system does work well. It does have a lot of the same features as the other providers that I've mentioned, where you can have multiple SSIDs, map them to different VLANs, have guest portals, etc. It has the controller built in, so you can have multiple access points and they all talk back to the controller to get their settings and whatnot. So the main reason that I would not recommend it is just because of the licensing cost. So you could go with something like Unify for free, while you have to buy the hardware, but there's no recurring licensing, and you get all the same features. So for a larger deployment, it might not be cost effective, and you don't really get anything extra unless you have a really full integration with all the other modules too. Sandstorm is pretty cool. We don't use that either, but you could have that on. I'd have to do a little bit more research to find out exactly how it works, but essentially it's a cloud sandbox, and certain protection engines, if it's not able to identify, say the antivirus engine is scanning a file and it comes back clean, it can send the file to Sandstorm, and it will actually run the file in a protected sandboxed server environment and observe the results. And if it detects that it's doing something malicious, then it will report that back to the UTM and it will block that transaction. So it's pretty neat, but it's up to you whether you'd want to give it a try or not. And the endpoint antivirus, that does work. We've tried it before. No concerns or complaints with it. I think it only works with Windows, though. But it is a really nice feature that they just include that 10 free accounts or 10 free users, and it is managed by the UTM, so that's really nice too. Once you install it on your endpoints, you go into the control panel here and you can set up all the features like what types of files are scanned and what to do when a malicious file is detected, if you wanted to delete it or warn the user, or what other type of actions you want to be taken. You can also use it to monitor your endpoints. So if one of them, say, shows up that it hasn't been reachable in 10 days, then there might be something wrong with it. You should check it out. Maybe somebody is on vacation and they unplugged it and turned it off. Or there could be a problem where something has gone wrong with it and it can't communicate. So it's kind of another good way to keep tabs on your hardware. And then Basic Guard, that's not any specific extra feature, it's a package. And it says in the description here, it just includes a lot of the basic functions from some of the other packages that we've talked about. So if you don't want to pay for the full package for each individual thing, because I think that gets kind of expensive if you do it that way, Basic Guard lets you have access to a lot of those, but maybe leaves some of the other more advanced features out, or something like that. I've never used it. We've just individually licensed the subscriptions because we've never had a case where a customer wants a lot of these, just usually one or two, so it's cheaper to do them individually in that case. And then support services. You don't get any professional support with the free license. You only basically get your community support, the forums. So if you do pay for the license, and you don't just use the essentials or the home, then you do get professional support. You can call in and ask them questions or email them, and they tend to be very helpful. So I think that pretty much covers everything. Oh, one other thing with the essentials license, which is the free for commercial use, your updating is a little bit unusual. So UpToDate is the automatic update engine that is included in all of the commercial paid versions, and as well as the home version it's included. But in the essentials version, there's no automatic firmware downloads. You have to do that by hand, and that's my only criticism of this platform. I think that can be a security issue because some people are just not going to do it, or they won't know how to do it. So I don't like that they've taken that feature out. That seems a little bit excessive to remove that, but it's not that hard to do it. It's just a little bit tedious. So you see where it says current firmware version, so you'll need to write that down or remember it so you know what it is. And if you go over to advanced, then it gives you a link that you can click that will open up. Well, I'll just close out of this and we'll do it from the beginning so we can see. It opens up this FTP page, and then you need to go. It doesn't tell you really what to do. It just says you can download the package here. So I had to figure it out. I'm sure there's something in a manual somewhere that I might have missed, but you go down to where it says UTM, and then V9, and then up to date. And then here are all of the archived up-to-date files. So you go all the way to the bottom, that has the newest ones that you need to look at. Go back to Overview and see what version you're on, 9.510-5. So we'll look for that. Here's 9.510.004. So here's 5. So that's this version. So we can see I've already added a few of them. And you have to do them all in order. You can't just go to the latest one, which is another thing that's a little bit of a pain. But we've got 6015 and 6023 already loaded here. So that would be, so 6023 is already there, so 6031. We'll need to download that. And then 604002. Oh, I think I see what they're doing here. They have the previous version and then the new version after it. But anyway, so after that, we can close out of there. You have to go to Advanced, click on your little folder, and then you just, I don't know if they have to be done in the right order here, but you just upload, apply. I'll do this again for the other one. Upload. And apply. And it's been imported. So now if we look on our overview, that should update eventually. And we've got the third one, so we just have to wait for the fourth one to populate. But after this process of you manually adding them, then it does happen automatically. You just push this update to latest version now and it will install them all in order. So you don't have to sit there and wait for it to install each one and then wait for it to reboot and come back and do the next one. The only thing that it takes out is under configuration, licensing info. Some features are disabled if you don't have the subscription, so the automatic firmware download you can't turn on. It just doesn't do anything. It does still give you automatic pattern downloads, which are for like the intrusion prevention and other antivirus engine, things like that. Whatever is included with it, those patterns automatically install, but it's just your main firmware does not. And now we have our 4 packages. So this is just a standard installation. We already have a video on our YouTube channel that shows how to do this, but now past this point, it's just you just follow that video. You just hit update to latest version now. You can make a configuration backup if you need to, so I'm not going to do that here. But this is the Essentials license. It had the, I think it's a 30-day trial that comes with it, and that's expired, and it reverts to the base functionality. So as you can see here, all of these are disabled. This one should be disabled, but it was configured already for another demo video we did when we had the 30-day trial, so I guess it stayed enabled. But you don't get anything really except the firewall. You get DNS. So this firewall can be a DNS resolver. So you point all of your internal devices through DHCP to the firewall's IP as the DNS server, and then it will resolve internal records, and then anything that it doesn't have internally it will forward to somewhere that you choose, and you can add any number of things here. And the request routing, well, you don't get that feature in this license, but you can point specific queries to specific servers if you needed to do that. And then static entries, these are just if you define a host internally. So if you have internal servers, you can define them in here, and you can access them like this, the example.com. That's just an internal entry, and then it'll resolve it to the correct IP address. And then you get your firewall, and you get NAT and masquerading, and that's pretty much it. You don't get anything else, but like I said earlier, it does the basics, and even in this limited state, it's a lot better than a standard router that you can pull off the shelf, especially if you're running a business, because this is very, very stable and reliable. And that's really important for businesses, because if you have to go and unplug the router and plug it back in because it froze or something, then that's really inconvenient to you, your staff, and your customers. So anyway, I hope that this has been helpful. We've gone over pretty much all of the different hardware and licensing options available for Sophos UTM 9, and I absolutely love the product. We've been using it for a number of years now, and I have no complaints about it. I still love it, and I continue to recommend it. Unfortunately, right now we are not a reseller for Sophos, so we're not going to be able to help you with any ordering. If you need to do that, you'll have to contact Sophos, and they'll refer you to a reseller in your area. Or you can just go with one of those online vendors. I think some of the hardware is on Amazon, but I would probably just go with a local reseller because they're able to get you better pricing, and then you can ensure that the hardware is going to be genuine and not going to have any defects, and it'll come with the full warranty and everything. But anyway, if you do have any questions about the Sophos product here, UTM 9, or any of the hardware, you can feel free to contact us with the information that is in the description to open up a paid support case if you need tech support, or if you just need a quick referral. We'll probably be able to help you out through there via email. We also have other videos, like I had mentioned earlier, on our YouTube channel here if you do already have UTM 9, or if you're thinking about getting it and you'd like to see more of how it operates. You can check out some of our other videos where we go into more detail about how to do the firmware updates, how to set up firewall rules, the remote access VPN, and I'll be releasing some more of those shortly too, where we'll go over some additional features. So that being said, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this useful and enjoyed it. And if there's anything that I didn't cover that you'd like a quick response, you can just leave that in the comments, or again, just use our contact information in the description. Thanks, and have a great day.